Welcome to this week's episode of the Lovebug Club.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Hadley.
Today we're kicking off Women's History Month by watching a comedy about female friendship, Bridesmaids. Annie's life is falling apart, and her best friend Lillian has just asked her to be her maid of honor. Annie struggles to keep her head above water while doing maid of honor duties, dealing with another woman vying for her best friend's attention and desperately needing new brake lights. There's friendship, drama, romance, and a whole lot of puppies. So let's jump in.
So I totally forgot that this movie opened on this wild sex scene.
I did too. Kristen Wiig just hanging out with her legs flailing around in the air like that. I was like, what kind of moves does this guy have that's causing this?
I do love Kristen Wiig and Jon Hamm.
One thing that they did with this that was really nice was they made Jon Hamm's character Ted have no redeeming qualities. They make that very clear from the beginning. He sucks. We know this. Not rooting for him. Rooting for Annie to get rid of him. I'm glad they established early on that this is a casual thing because it would have been very concerning if it wasn't.
In the morning, she gets up, checks her makeup and her hair. He does not deserve that kind of effort from her.
I'm glad we don't have to see a whole lot of Ted in this film.
I could not have handled a lot of Ted.
I did get a kick of the scene where Annie's climbing over the gate and it opens up because it felt so on par for her situation with Ted.
Did she even look for a button before she's just started climbing over that? I would spend a considerable amount of time searching before I just decided to climb over.
She just shook it a little bit, but she just climbed it. I think that sums up Annie pretty well at this point. She's like, whatever, this is what life is. I really like the opening shots of Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a fantastic city, so if you haven't been there, everyone should go check it out.
I want to go to Milwaukee because my favorite architect is Santiago Calatrava, and he designed the museum there.
Oh, yeah. The museum's so cool. Seeing it open up is just amazing.
So I like that they included that in the overhead shots because that is literally all I know about Milwaukee and the only reason I want to go there.
That's a good reason to go. Milwaukee has a huge music festival. It's a few weeks long. It's on the water. And it's fantastic. I've seen Britney Spears there and Tom Petty there twice.
I was wondering why they'd set the movie there. I don't feel like there are very many movies set in Milwaukee.
Maybe it was a juxtaposition thing. Her friend is moving to a bigger city and making all these new friends in this bigger place. And she's kind of stuck in this smaller city, removed from everybody else.
Oh, I didn't even think about it like that.
So then we see Terry Crews hosting a workout in the park. And Annie and Lillian are hiding behind a tree, also doing the workout.
I love Terry Crews because of White Chicks and also Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I'm really uncomfortable anytime a man uses the word bitch to talk about women.
Yeah, I am too. That was a little jarring.
Also, they could have been more subtle about ripping off his workout class.
They could have been much further away.
They were like 20 feet away. The ideal scenario would be that they would just pay for the class. If you're working on a budget, like they said, I mean, don't rip people off. You're essentially stealing his work by doing this. But if you are gonna go this route, maybe take a video of him teaching the class and then go home and watch that video instead of just doing the workout 20 feet away behind a tree.
Yeah, that would solve their problem. Then they run off and we pick up with them in a cafe.
Annie is telling Lillian about her night with Ted.
And Lillian does not like Ted, which no one should.
Lillian points out that Annie always feels bad about herself after sleeping with Ted, and she thinks it might be a form of self-punishment. I thought that was really good insight from Lillian that maybe Annie doesn't realize on her own. There were a few times that if I was Annie, I probably would have felt a little judged by Lillian in this conversation just because of the faces she was making. But overall, like, Lillian's pretty great about not being judgmental. Lillian's a good friend to have.
I think so too. I also thought their talk about penises was pretty funny.
Yeah, I love Annie's impression with her hands on her hips and her like one eye closed.
Yeah.
Their jokes were funny, but I didn't like that it stemmed from the idea that Ted puts his penis in Annie's face, whether or not she has offered to do stuff.
It seems very on brand for Ted. Not saying it's good, just saying sounds like something he would do. So then they walk down the street and we see Annie's old bakery.
Cake Baby.
I like the name Cake Baby. Now we see she's working at a jewelry store instead. And we see that she should not be selling wedding rings to people.
I was wondering how she got this job because she's terrible at it. I'm glad that they told us immediately that it was a favor for her mom. And then we meet her roommates.
Rebel Wilson, who has a super gross tattoo
Yeah, she got a free tattoo today in some stranger's van, and it is now very infected. And Matt Lucas, he's one of the hosts of the Great British Baking Show. I do not enjoy his humor for the most part.
Yeah, his humor's growing on me, but I really like Noel Fielding.
I love Noel. Have you seen the old Greg videos?
Yes, I watched the whole TV series that old Greg is from. I own it on DVD. I love it. The Mighty Boosh.
I haven't seen the whole TV show, but I was obsessed with old Greg.
If you like obscure British on at 4 a.m. TV show, The Mighty Boosh is absolutely worth a watch. I love it so much. One fun fact I found out about this is after filming this movie, Rebel Wilson and Matt Lucas decided to actually become roommates. I thought that was cute.
They're funny. They definitely seem like siblings. Then Annie goes over to Lillian's and finds out she's engaged.
Lillian asks her to be maid of honor. It just is like kind of a natural reaction for her, because she probably figured she always would be. But then she's like, oh, wait. You've got a lot going on in your life. Is this something you actually feel comfortable taking on?
It's good that Lillian was being considerate of Annie's stress levels, since Annie doesn't seem to really be considering her own stress levels.
No, she seems to not have self-awareness.
Yeah, and I understand wanting to be there for your best friend and be her maid of honor, because it feels really special to be asked. But if someone asks you to do that, you really need to think about whether or not you actually have the capacity to do it.
Right. And ask them what they expect from you.
Also, just being in a wedding party is really expensive sometimes, depending on the wedding. It would have been good for them to discuss the financial responsibilities that agreeing to this role entails.
It becomes very clear in a few scenes the financial difference between the life that Lillian is marrying into and the life that she has been living.
And poor Annie's business just went under. She does not have a lot of extra money to be spending right now.
Right. And if she did, it'd probably be to move out from her two roommates. There's this little in-between scene where we see Annie in bed and we see a picture of Annie and Lillian when they were kids. So we establish that they've been friends for quite a long time.
Then we meet Annie's mom,
who goes to AA for the inspirational people, even though she's never had anything to drink. I do know a lot of people that are like, oh, I just like going certain places because I feel really inspired by the people there. I'd never thought about AA being one of those places, but I thought that was kind of a funny detail.
When we meet Annie's mom, it makes a lot of sense why Annie is the way she is. It just made me think about our conversation from the John Tucker Must Die episode about how parents' relationships influence their children's relationships.
I forget the exact term she calls her ex-husband's new wife. Annie's like, they've been married for 12 years, Mom. She holds on to it. Annie holds on to it. Next, Annie goes to Chicago for the engagement party.
Oh, I did not realize it was in Chicago. Blister in the Sun is playing as Annie pulls up to the engagement party.
I liked the music in this movie.
Me too, especially the song at the end. We meet Lillian's cousin Rita, who has 3 sons.
I love this actress, Wendy McClendon Covey.
She's very funny. We also meet Lillian's coworker Becca, who's played by Ellie Kemper from The Office and The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. The guy that Becca thinks is Annie's date, what has he been in?
Steve Banos. He was in Ned's Classified School Survival Guide.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
40-Year-Old Virgin, Superbad, Pineapple Express.
He was a teacher in Freaks and Geeks. I think he's in a lot of Judd Apatow's movies.
That's funny because the guy who directed this film also directed Freaks and Geeks, Paul Feig. This whole scene is full of office people. Then Annie meets Megan, who is Melissa McCarthy. And the person that Melissa McCarthy mistakes for Annie's date in this is also in the office. He is Hank, the security guard.
I forgot he played that role. Megan is Doug's sister.
Yes, she is. I love Melissa McCarthy. She's so versatile and she can play absolutely anything.
I know her as Suki from Gilmore Girls.
I think Megan's a very interesting character.
I read that Melissa McCarthy decided she was going to base this character off Guy Fieri, which is so random.
I read that too. And that they had to like pump the brakes on her wanting to get frosted tips. And then we meet Helen, who is married to the person that plays David Wallace on The Office.
He's Lillian's fiance's boss in this movie.
Also, Maya Rudolph was pregnant while shooting this.
Obviously, production does a really good job of hiding it usually. The dead giveaway for me is that pregnant women's lips are so much fuller.
I hadn't noticed that.
I really like this intro to Helen because when she turns around in that gown and starts walking over to them, she totally looks like Ursula. It's just something about the way the gown moves, gliding over with her octopus legs or something. Plus, her attitude definitely adds to the Ursula vibes.
We find out very quickly that Helen is not okay with Lillian's relationship with Annie. Very threatened by it.
They are very threatened by each other and immediately start competing with each other to be her best friend.
Yes.
Helen walks over and Annie compliments her, saying she's beautiful. And Helen responds by saying, "You're so cute." Just immediately giving off the vibe that she thinks she's better than everyone.
It happens very fast.
First, Lillian's dad gives a speech.
I like her dad. The 3 sentences we hear from him in the film. I liked him.
He's very frugal, and I appreciate it.
I do too. And Annie gives her speech, which I liked. I thought it was short, sweet, and super cute.
But then Helen gives this heartfelt speech that's very dramatic and kicks off a speech battle between Annie and Helen. It was interesting to see, instead of 2 women fighting over a man, it was 2 women fighting over a woman who they want to be friends with.
Yeah, I really liked how friendship forward this movie was. The romance kind of seems to be like, yeah, it's happening. The friendship part's the most important part.
Friendships can be just as impactful on a person's life as romantic relationships, and your friends can hold important roles in your life too. Your significant other is not the most important person in your life. Your friends are also very important people.
Right.
Their whole rivalry just seems so silly because you can have more than one friend and you can also have more than one best friend.
You can. But as we learn later, Helen has never really had any friends. So she probably feels very threatened by this.
I think it's very easy to just blame the other person in the interaction and be like, well, Helen's the problem. I don't think Annie is thinking about how she is also contributing to this dynamic. Like, it's not just one of them that's causing problems. Both of them coming together is what's causing the problems.
It feels to me like at first she doesn't quite understand why this woman's being the way she is about this situation.
I got the vibe that Annie immediately felt insecure around Helen because when Helen walked over, Annie gave her the little up down.
I think at first she just doesn't understand people forming close bonds so quickly with her friend that she's had this close bond with her whole life, and she's having a reaction that she doesn't really know how to process. So she does cause problems just by not understanding how she's feeling. As we see, she can't deal with her emotions very well.
I totally understand where she's coming from. I think that I've been quite oblivious to how I contribute to the dynamic. It's so much easier to just blame the other person instead of taking accountability for how you're contributing to it.
I definitely think you're right about the insecurities. I also think she's just confused and totally taken off guard by this situation. She's kind of like, wait, they're claiming that my best friend is their best friend, but they barely know my best friend. Does my best friend feel the same way? And Helen presents herself as so much of something that Annie is not at this point. Helen seems, extremely put together and can afford stuff and is on top of everything, because that's the picture Helen paints to the world.
In their speeches, they start speaking different languages. Rose Byrne wasn't very well known for her comedy skills, and the speeches were partially improvised, and Rose Byrne just started speaking Thai and didn't actually know the language. Everyone thought it was hilarious, and so she had to go learn some actual Thai words so that she could say this line.
Do you know what Annie says in Spanish?
She says, "Gracias para vivir en la casa, en las escuelas, en la azul marcada," which translates to "thank you for living in the house, in the school, in the blue market." She didn't say anything.
That's fantastic. I kind of felt like Annie wouldn't have retained a lot of her school Spanish.
Afterwards, at the party, Lillian was being really understanding towards Annie disliking Helen.
Yeah, she was. And Annie was able to talk to her.
She started kind of ragging on Helen, and Lillian was like, get it out, let it all out, give her a chance.
Annie is driving back to Milwaukee and imitating Helen along the way, and she gets pulled over because she's swerving all over the place. Also, we find out that her brake lights are out.
She gets pulled over by an Irish policeman.
Chris O'Dowd, who plays him, can do an American accent. He's in a lot of things as an American, but he really likes to be able to use his Irish accent whenever possible because he is Irish.
Yeah, I liked how they included that as part of the comedy because later Annie is like, I thought you couldn't be a policeman if you weren't a citizen here.
Yeah. To prove that she's not drunk, she starts dancing for him. And he's kind of like, this doesn't prove anything to me.
It felt jarring to me to see her dancing around after being pulled over by a policeman. If that had been anyone else except a white woman, it would not have gone the same way. I think when I originally saw this movie and I was less aware of the world and all the problems in the world, I was able to enjoy it a lot easier. So all this stuff with the cop was also not as fun for me this time around.
I don't know. I thought about that some too, but I do think movies are supposed to be a place where you can try to escape daily life.
Officer Rhodes says, we're not all bad. Actually, the rest of them are, but not me. I'm the best of them. I wonder if he's talking about being a cop or being a man. Oh, I have a question. He started writing her a ticket and then rips it up because he finds out she owned Cake Baby and she got dumped when her bakery closed. So he's feeling bad for her and decides to not give her a ticket. But I thought that once the ticket is started, they had to complete it.
I've only heard of that in movies, so I don't know if it's true or not.
If anyone knows the answer to that, let us know.
I enjoyed Annie and Officer Rhodes's interactions. Even off the bat, he's encouraging her to follow what was once her dream. Gets a little pushy later, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're going to have different opinions about that. All the baking stuff feels like overstepping to me.
This situation, it kind of felt like he was meeting a celebrity almost like, oh, I loved that you did and that you did. In this instance, it feels like he's just kind of hyped to meet the face behind the cream puffs and cake that he liked so much. But then Annie goes back to her place and sadly makes herself a cupcake. A really intricate cupcake.
I'm very impressed.
That she knows the recipe for a single cupcake?
Yes.
I have a recipe for 2 cupcakes, but not for just one.
It speaks to her baking expertise, but that was very impressive to me because I'd have to do a lot of calculations to figure out how to take a recipe down for one. Annie and Helen are going to play tennis together.
I love Annie's yellow tennis outfit.
Yeah, she looks very cute. And we meet Helen's stepkids, who are awful to her, but she totally just rolls with it.
Yeah, her kids are the worst. I also really like that Annie and Helen are making this effort to try to get to know each other. I know Lillian planned it and then bailed, but Annie and Helen still stayed.
Their tennis game gets super competitive, which everybody should have seen coming.
Absolutely. Also, one of the tennis partners is Steve Carell's wife, who's also on The Office.
Is that the one that gets hit or something and Annie's like, get your shit together, Carol?
She's the one who plays on Helen's team.
Who's the one on Annie's team?
Her name is Melanie Hutzel. So after Annie and Helen play a very violent game of tennis, we're back at Annie's apartment and Annie is talking to Bryn and Gil. And we find that Bryn has just, been reading Annie's journal. They go back to Chicago and Annie takes all of the girls to a Brazilian restaurant.
Everyone looks so funny walking in their pencil skirts and high heels. They look very overdressed.
They do. I love how supportive they were of her bridal shower idea. Except for Helen.
Is this when Annie brings up the Paris theme? And Helen immediately shoots it down, even though she steals it later?
Yes. Becca suggests Pixar. Megan suggests on that theme, but Fight Club and Surprise Fight Club. And then they all eat their meat, except for Helen, who eats a salad.
I probably also would have had a salad here. I've never been to a place that shaves off the meat in front of you and definitely don't have the desire to go either. I don't eat that much meat anyway.
This seemed like what they do at a lot of Brazilian steakhouses where they bring the food around on a sword. If you're not a meat eater, I wouldn't recommend it.
Lillian says everyone's a stone cold pack of weirdos. That's how I want to describe my friends. Like, if I can't describe my friends that way, I don't want them.
Yeah, that's such a good descriptor. People use weird as like a insult. Weird is way more fun.
I exclusively use weird as a compliment. I'd much rather be weird than boring. And I want everyone around me to be weird too.
Yeah. So then they go to the dress shop. That's appointment only.
With the amount of wedding dress shows that are on TV, how does Annie not know that you have to have a reservation?
I have a feeling she doesn't watch wedding shows, especially after her breakup. Helen gets them in because Helen knows the person working there.
Helen knows Whitney, and Helen is obsessed with the first dress that she looks at, Fritz Bernay's, which is $800.
She's obsessed with it because of the designer name.
So Annie walks over and picks a much cheaper option to show Lillian, and I know that talking about money is hard for people to do sometimes, but I think the best way to handle this situation would be for Annie to pull Lillian aside and tell Lillian that she's very important to you and you love her and you want to be part of her wedding party, but you can't afford that purple dress. Lillian can then decide whether she wants this expensive dress in her wedding party or if she wants her best friend in her wedding party.
Yeah, I think she should have talked to Lillian because I have a feeling Lillian would not care about the dress. They're trying on dresses and each one has their favorite dress on, and then the food poisoning hits.
Megan starts to get sick and Helen is real quick to jump in and say, "You got food poisoning from that restaurant." Annie responds and says she had the same thing, but she feels fine, even though she's sweating profusely.
I did not like this whole everyone getting sick. I'd watched Bridesmaids maybe once before, and honestly, this scene had turned me off to it until watching it now. So this time I just didn't look.
I was anticipating not enjoying this scene, especially after reading that Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo didn't really want to do this scene, and that Paul Feig and Judd Apatow are the ones who pushed for it. I wasn't expecting to like it. I actually thought it was pretty funny.
I think they wrote it in a funny way. I just don't enjoy that kind of humor so much. So
I totally forgot that Becca threw up on Rita's head. That was one part that was not funny to me at all. I'd be real upset if someone threw up on my head. I'd be vomiting and crying. But if I was Rita, I'd be like, as soon as you feel better, Becca, you are washing my hair because I am not touching your vomit.
Yeah, I probably would have washed my hair immediately.
It sucks that they all have food poisoning, but having food poisoning together can be a really bonding experience if they can get past blaming Annie for choosing that restaurant. I think that this could bring them all closer together eventually.
Eventually. Having to share one bathroom with other people who have food poisoning is tricky.
I almost had to share a bathroom when I got food poisoning. I was traveling and had a fling on my tour, so he slept in my room. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling really sick.
Oh no.
But I ran to the bathroom and essentially started having this scene. But while I was in there, I heard this guy wake up and start scrambling around the room. And he came to the bathroom door, said he had to go back to his room because he also had food poisoning. I just couldn't believe that in my 8 months of traveling around Asia, I did not get food poisoning ever until the one night that I had a boy sleeping in my room.
Oh my gosh, that sounds horrifying.
But he was sweet and brought me water later, and we kept hanging out, so it ended up being kind of a bonding experience.
I'm so glad you guys were able to be closer because of it, because that could have gone a very different direction. And I feel so bad for Lillian not making it across the street.
Yeah, Lillian in the wedding dress running through the street and just plopping down to shit was pretty funny. Horrible if you're the person in that situation. I love that she was just waving the cars to go around her.
Yeah, me too.
I know that Whitney, the woman who works at the dress shop, was obnoxious during this scene, but I kind of understand where she's coming from. Her job is being seriously put in jeopardy because, first of all, she let in a group that didn't have an appointment, and now they've made a mess of the entire store, and they've ruined dresses. So I kind of understand Whitney being super stressed and not handling this situation very well.
Yeah, same. Also, just the thought of having to clean up that bathroom. Ugh. Then Annie is back at Ted's and they're laying in bed together and she asks him to go to the wedding with her, which he says no.
We skipped her blind date.
The blind date got cut in the actual thing. That's an extra scene.
Becca set her up on a blind date and she went over to his house to meet him and she meets his kid and the kid is hilarious.
Yeah, that's not in the one I watched.
Oh my gosh, really? I'm so sad you didn't see this scene because the kid is adorable. The guy seems sweet, but Annie overhears him on the phone talking to his ex-wife about how much he misses her and stuff, so their date doesn't go anywhere. But as Annie is waiting for him, she's sitting with the kid and the kid says, "Are you afraid of dying? Because my mom is gonna kill you." And then he started dancing. He was like, "Do you want to watch me dance?"
I think you watched the unrated version. In the one you watched, did Becca mock Annie for being single and offer to arrange a date for her? And the scene with the mom originally talks about her dad's chicken coop sex act.
Yes.
You watched the unrated version. Do you have a scene where Matt Lucas and Rebel Wilson are in the bathtub together?
So I've got a few more scenes than you. Okay, so then Annie goes back to Ted.
Yes, Annie is in bed with Ted and asks him to go to the wedding with her. And he's like, no, it'd be kind of hard to explain a relationship to everybody. Ted's the worst.
He says no for her sake so that she won't have to explain their relationship to everyone, which is annoying because he's obviously doing it for himself.
If he actually wanted to go but not explain the relationship, they could easily just say that they were friends.
She makes up George Glass to try to make him jealous, which doesn't work because he's not into her.
Ted is not really a solid person for Annie to be hanging out with.
Ted is a fuck buddy to Annie, and so she has lower standards about what to expect in that relationship. But you can have positive relationships with your fuck buddies where it's mutually beneficial and it's not just Ted using you.
Also, apparently... Oh, go ahead. Yeah. It seems like she doesn't... I don't know. There's something about this situation that just seems like she doesn't care to stand up or make a point to stand up for herself.
I kind of understand probably where Annie is at because I've been there, but you just accept less than what you deserve because you don't think you deserve more.
Right. And Lillian points out earlier that Annie's a great person and she deserves someone who will appreciate her.
I feel like Annie doesn't really like herself at this point. She isn't respecting herself and she's kind of just letting things happen to her instead of deciding what she wants for her life. So I can understand why she's seeing Ted and why she chose him as a fuck buddy, but I would suggest finding someone a little less selfish.
Going off of what you were trying to say earlier, it makes sense to me that she would choose Ted because it doesn't feel like she has a lot of self-worth right now. And Ted could care less, it seems, about her interests and passions and her in general. So it makes sense that she would pick Ted because if she doesn't see anything in herself, why would she pick someone who saw something in her?
I agree with Lillian saying that it's kind of self-destructive because Annie only goes to Ted when she's feeling bad about herself. She had a failed blind date that she was supposed to take to the wedding and that fell through. So now she asks Ted to go to a wedding with her, which logically she knows he's going to say no to. It's like she wants to hurt herself.
Or she's feeling, depending on which movie you watched, she's feeling bad about giving everyone food poisoning. I read it as Helen made her feel really bad. So she felt like, okay, I'll just go to Ted.
I hadn't even thought about how different that scene would be without the previous scene.
It's very different because it's her not having a good date versus her having a friendship issue. Annie goes to the liquor store and runs into Officer Rhodes.
I don't like him, but I do like them for each other.
I really like them for each other, too.
That's probably how I'm going to feel about a lot of these heterosexual relationships.
Yeah, you don't seem to be a very big fan of men.
Nope, def not.
I just thought this whole scene was kind of cute.
He's very awkward and goofy in this scene, which makes me like them together. Like, they both act that way. They're so much more comfortable around each other, and he's just such a better match for her than Ted.
They made him the exact opposite of Ted.
They're eating carrots, and Annie throws an ugly carrot on the ground, which he gets upset about because it's littering.
I can get why he feels like someone using the ground as a trash can is also a form of littering.
Yeah, but I think it's different if it's trash versus a carrot that could be eaten by wild animals. I'm also against littering, but I wouldn't get upset about someone throwing a carrot on the ground.
I thought he was she's like, okay, this is going to bug me. I'm going to pick up this carrot. I would also have picked it up. It would have bothered me too.
I'd pick it up if it was trash. I think we should put up a poll on Instagram of whether or not this is littering.
Or also, would you have picked it up too? Because, like, I don't think it's littering, but I still would have picked it up. Then he takes her to take radar for the cars going by. Is he allowed to bring her along when he goes to track down someone who's going 98 in a 55 zone?
In this scene, he lets her get in the front seat when they go chase someone down, right? And then at the end of the movie, he makes her sit in the back because he says there's some rule about her not being able to sit in the front while he's on duty.
This is not consistent. If she's not allowed to sit in the front seat, she's probably not allowed to go give people tickets with you either. But I did think this scene was cute, especially when he's trying to teach her the stance for how to properly take radar.
They're getting kind of flirty with each other.
So then Annie is back at her place and just emailed the bachelorette party about the lake house, and everyone calls her because Helen got to them first. They all want to go to Vegas.
I thought Annie's idea was cute and also makes a lot of sense why she would want to do that because she doesn't have the money to go to Vegas.
Yeah, and it's a cute little throwback to their childhood. I'm not in the movie and all these people are doing the things they do for plot movement, but I'd be totally fine doing a lake house.
Especially Lillian's parents' lake house. There'd be a lot of nostalgia and, I don't know, it makes sense to kind of say goodbye to your childhood when you're getting married because you're moving from one chapter of your life to another chapter. So symbolically, it would also be sweet.
Yes, it would.
I feel really bad for Annie because she's being railroaded by Helen about Las Vegas. She doesn't have the money to go, and she's also afraid of flying. Why does no one care that Annie is afraid of flying?
Yeah, that surprised me so much because Lillian didn't even sit with Annie on the plane.
Helen says that she offered to pay for Annie to sit in first class with them. I'm sure she would bring it up very often that she paid for your plane ticket. But if you don't let it bother you, she loses all of her incentive to keep bringing it up. So just let her buy your plane ticket.
I don't think Annie's at that point where she can let it not bother her.
I want Annie to kick her ego to the curb. I've never understood why people refuse to use resources that are available to them because of their pride.
I would have not been okay with Helen buying my ticket because she would have constantly brought it up for the rest of forever. And even if I was like, whatever you offered, it'd be annoying that she would never let it go. She'd probably make it seem like Annie owed her some kind of debt forever. I don't care for people constantly bringing up things that bug me.
I would have let her buy the ticket just because I don't personally feel weird about letting people pay for things.
I do not enjoy people offering to pay for things for me that I know they're going to try to hold over me forever. Because for me, that's just not worth it. It's just going to be a constant nuisance. It's like, you offered to do this thing and now you're holding it against me. There's no point. I'm just going to pay for my own thing. To me, it's like the cost benefit analysis of, is it worth it? It's not worth it. If Megan had offered to pay, be like, oh, thanks. That's really thoughtful of you.
Yeah, Megan offering to pay would be a totally different scenario than Helen offering to pay.
I would accept it from other people, just not from her. Annie got outvoted and they are going to Vegas instead of the lake house. And so now we see them getting on the plane and everyone is in first class except for Annie.
Annie's seat is in coach with Annie Mumolo, which is the person who co-wrote this movie with Kristen Wiig.
I like this actress a lot. I'm really happy to see her in this movie.
She's hilarious.
The man that Megan sits next to is actually Melissa McCarthy's husband in real life, Ben Falcone.
So I also had a note about Melissa McCarthy being married to Air Marshal John in real life. They're so funny together.
They're also in Gilmore Girls together.
What? I didn't know he was in Gilmore Girls.
When Fran dies, who owned the Dragonfly Inn, and they're trying to negotiate with the lawyer who's carrying the coffin at the time, that's him.
I remember that scene now.
They play off each other so well. I'm so happy they're both in this.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall in their house because I'm sure it's hilarious all the time.
Me too. When Becca and Rita are talking, I think it's really sweet how they can open up and talk to each other.
Yeah, I'm glad that Becca has found someone that she can confide in about being unhappy with her sex life with her husband.
Yeah, and someone that gets it from a different perspective. Becca's husband sounds like a very rough person to be married to, sex life-wise.
Yeah, sounds like he might have some OCD tendencies. Once Annie's pills kick in, She comes back up to first class. I have several quotes written down from this scene. Now that I have rewatched it, I'll probably be saying all these quotes again.
One of my friends used to use one of them a lot. I did think it was kind of a bummer that Annie is coming out as a bad guy when she mocks Helen. She's kept this under control for the most part. Like, this is really too bad that this is how this is coming out.
Yeah, when she's like, oh, you do? Helen knows the owner. Also, help me, I'm poor.
In college, I had a few friends that would always say that.
Oh, yes. I say that a lot. And also, money, please.
From Parks and Rec.
Yes, those are my favorites to quote when I'm running out of money.
Also, the flight attendant in this scene is just fantastic.
I love his interactions with Kristen Wiig's character.
Stove, or Steve. He's played by Mitch Silpa.
Steve, or Stove, tells Annie she has 3 seconds to get out of first class, and she goes, you can't get anywhere in 3 seconds. You're setting me up for a loss. Did not expect that much logic to come out of Annie at this point. I wish that Annie was this sassy and confident all the time.
Same.
I could do with a little less people-pleasing and a little more of this rebellious Annie.
Yeah, me too.
Air Marshal John is coming out of the bathroom, and Megan comes up and stops him and starts hitting on him.
And puts her leg up very high.
Yeah, I am very impressed with how high she got her leg.
Especially in such a small space.
Becca and Rita are both very drunk now and talking about how unhappy they are in their marriages. Becca says, you're more beautiful than Cinderella.
Yeah, I thought that was so sweet.
I love that Becca is such a Disney person.
She seems like such an uplifting person. I feel like Ellie Kemper just tends to play that kind of role, like a really sweet, uplifting person with a little bit of sass.
Whenever she was ordering the alcohol on the airplane, she apparently had a really similar line in the office where she ordered alcohol. That just speaks to the idea that she essentially plays a very similar character in all of her roles. It just seems like really fitting for her to play that type of character.
So then Annie sees a colonial woman churning butter on the wing of the plane and has to let everybody know. Annie's caused all kinds of commotion on this plane. She's like, there's something they're not telling us.
Yeah, and Annie Mumolo stands up and starts screaming too.
Air Marshal John is like, I'm an air marshal. And Megan's like, I knew it.
I love that she knew. I mean, like, obviously it's scripted, but I love that she knew.
Rita and Becca are kissing. Good for them.
Yes, I hope they both go date women who will treat them better than their husbands. In the original script, the bachelorette party made it to Las Vegas, but they decided to cut those parts of the script because The Hangover had just been released.
And they didn't want any comparisons, even though everyone compared it to it anyway.
So they changed it so they never get there. And I actually way prefer that they didn't make it to Las Vegas because this plane scene is so iconic.
To avoid having to go to Vegas, Annie gets escorted off the plane in handcuffs by a police officer. And then they take a bus back to Chicago.
They probably got put on a no-fly list.
Her especially.
I feel really bad for Lillian, and I'm proud of her for having this hard conversation with Annie because it is her wedding and it should be exactly what she wants. It should be all about her.
Right. And she's also worried about her friend. She doesn't need the worry of that on top of getting married.
Yeah, I appreciate that she comes from such a caring place. It's not even a selfish place like, this is my wedding and you're ruining it. It's, I'm worried about you and the stress that this is adding to your plate. So let's figure out something else so we can all be happy.
You mentioned this earlier, but Lillian, I think, is a really good friend and a really healthy friend.
I do also feel bad for Annie, though, because it definitely hurts to be asked to step down as maid of honor. That's a pretty big blow.
I couldn't tell if she was being asked to step down as maid of honor or just step down from the duties of maid of honor. I rewatched it a bunch. It wasn't clear.
I think that Lillian was mostly focusing on the duties, but I just assumed that the title came with the duties.
Yeah, I kind of did too. That's why I went back and rewatched it a bunch. But it would surprise me if she took away the title as well. Either way, very difficult conversation to have for both of them.
And I'm proud of Annie for accepting it immediately. There was no pushback from her at all. She understood that it was Lillian's decision and she didn't really get a say in it. So I appreciated that from her because I couldn't promise that I would be as graceful about being asked to step down as maid of honor. I'd be like, damn, I really let my friend down.
I wouldn't do well with it.
No, I wouldn't either. Annie is feeling pretty low and down on herself after this, but I'm really happy that she goes to Officer Rhodes instead of Ted.
Me too. And I love how she goes and finds him on the side of the road as Annie was driving home from the airport. She pulls up to where Officer Rhodes is parked on the side of the road watching for speeders and asks him if he wants to get a drink. And he, of course, is like, yeah. So they go to a bar.
And he calls her the maid of dishonor when she tells him what happened. That was really funny.
They seem really good for each other. I love how he hypes her up all the time.
While they're at this bar, they talk more about baking. Annie says very clearly that she does not bake anymore. I feel like she's setting a pretty clear boundary here.
She is. I can understand why he's so curious, though, too. Because he's like, you were really good at something, and now you just won't do it at all because it didn't work out? Like, what?
And then they sleep together.
And the next morning, we get a nice contrast to Ted, where Rhodes brings her coffee and it's like, yeah, of course you stayed over. Like, why wouldn't you? And I read that her bra was symbolism because Annie was not ready to open up to Ted. So she always kept her bra on with Ted, but she was more comfortable and more open with Rhodes. So that's why she's not wearing a bra in this scene.
I read that also, and I like that visual aspect of it. He tells her he has a surprise in the kitchen, and he has set up this whole baking station for her, and she doesn't react well. I'm definitely on Annie's side here. I understand the thought behind it from Officer Rhodes. The thought is sweet, but it's also not his job to fix her. And she said very clearly that she doesn't bake anymore. So my interpretation of this scene is that Officer Rhodes cares more about being able to eat Annie's food than actually listening to what Annie wants.
I don't think it's necessarily sweet what he did, but I think he sees this person who used to have this passion, who's kind of aimlessly wandering through life. And to me, it felt like he was trying to help her find her passion for something again. I don't agree with how he did it. I do think he's kind of pushy about this. And she's clearly not at a point where she's ready to bake again. And she also seems to have some other things going on. I wasn't crazy about how either of them handled it, but I get why Annie stormed out and left because he didn't listen to what she had told him multiple times.
I do think Annie could have also responded in a healthier way, but I understand this reaction to having your boundaries crossed because sometimes I also react like this when I'm very frustrated about my boundaries being crossed. Ideally, they would have sat down and had a conversation about why this wasn't okay for him to do and why she needs him to not push her towards this. But I think she's just really used to men taking advantage of her. I think she thought that Officer Rhodes was going to be different. And so him crossing this boundary in her mind maybe makes him not as different as she thought and was hoping, and it's kind of disappointing for her.
So I've had some reactions like this before. Usually the times that I'm like that are when I'm discovering that maybe I might have feelings, but I freak out and I push them really far away. I think there might be a little bit of that there too, because in the next scene when she calls Lillian and tells her about what happens with Rhodes, she even says something good was happening and I just couldn't handle it. And so I messed it up.
I think women are taught that we ask for too much in relationships and we expect too much. And so I think it's very much a default thing when there's a conflict for us to think it was entirely our fault. I feel like when she was on the phone with Lillian, she was taking too much ownership of the issue that happened.
I didn't. I thought she was taking ownership for her side of the situation. She hasn't reacted like that. Other times he's brought up baking, and I'm not saying what he did was right, but in the car scene where she calls Lillian, it felt like she was taking ownership for her part of it and acknowledging her pattern that she has.
I do also think that she's emotionally unavailable. She's got a lot of her own stuff that she needs to figure out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Don't like what he did, but I do think it pushed her to kind of realize, like, nope, maybe not ready for this right now. I think she could use a lot of therapy. Not necessarily because of her reaction, but just because she's having a lot of stuff going on and could probably use someone to help her out. She probably can't afford therapy right now. Therapy should be cheaper.
She's dealing with a lot of stressful things right now that she doesn't know how to handle in a healthy way. So therapy would be helpful.
We're back at Annie's apartment and Bryn wakes her up because Annie got a package.
Yes, it's a Paris-themed invitation for Lillian's wedding shower.
Yes, I would be very grouchy.
I understand why she is so triggered.
And then she goes to work where a teenage girl wants to buy a BFF necklace, and Annie then unloads all of her thoughts and feelings about friendship onto this unexpecting teenager. I love that they can dish it out to each other until Annie goes too far.
And ends up calling her a cunt.
Don't take your problems out on a child. This child is giving just as good as she gets, and I'm sure she probably responded well to what Annie said. But I understand why Annie got fired.
Honestly, Annie should have gotten fired a long time ago. She is not selling this dream of happiness. The blows keep coming because then Annie's roommates ask her to move out.
She has a life falling apart montage. Rhodes calls her a bunch and tells her that he got the message and will stop calling, get your brake lights fixed. And then her roommates kick her out, and then she moves back in with her mom. And she goes by her old store that got defaced.
This is where I hope she finds a therapist to help her get through this rock bottom.
I do too. She's in a really rough spot. Yeah, then it's the bridal shower.
Yeah, it's at Helen's house.
And the driveway's so long there are refreshments halfway through.
And then all the guests park their car but ride a horse to the house.
That seems like such a bad idea. Like, they're in dresses.
This is a formal event where most women will be wearing dresses. So why would you have everyone ride horses?
Yeah, imagine wearing like a pencil skirt and having to hop on that horse. You just like fling yourself over it and call it a day.
Yeah, you're gonna have to ride side saddle. But like, Helen has a ton of money. If you are so set on having horses, just pay for a carriage to be pulled behind it too, because that is also fancy. And I would argue it's even fancier.
Right. I would as well.
Annie walks in the house, and there are these two women that walk across the foyer, and they're just extras. But one of them is Jillian Bell from Workaholics.
I saw that. I like her.
She's funny. I wish she had a bigger part in this movie.
Me too. But yeah, even their extras are like wonderful comedians.
A lot of funny people worked on this movie. No wonder it did so well.
Yeah, exactly. Then Lillian comes up to talk to Annie, and this made me very sad at how strained their friendship is at the moment.
Lillian walks up and she's like, "You're here." And Annie's like, "I was invited. Aren't I supposed to be?" Which is awkward.
Very awkward. Then they're opening presents, and Annie has given Lillian this super sweet friendship box. It's so thoughtful.
Very sweet and nostalgic. Lillian seems to really appreciate it.
Helen cannot take it and gives her a trip to Paris,
which is info she learned from Annie. So I understand why Annie loses her freaking mind, because I would too.
Same. Annie has a massive breakdown, and I get it. Fully support it. Don't like her accusing them of being lesbians in the way she does. Rest of the fit, I get it.
Still super rude to ruin your friend's bridal shower, but I do understand why she's having this meltdown.
Maybe didn't handle it the best by breaking everything, but again, I get it. I would be very upset, and at this point, I would have lost it. I'm a relatively tolerant person.
Oh, I'm not.
We find out that the shower favors are puppies, and Megan has already taken 2 of them.
First of all, it's a horrible idea to have puppies as a favor.
Such a bad idea. Dogs are so much work, and no one ever understands that.
It's like a 10-year commitment minimum that you're handing off to people. Annie is ranting about how this isn't the Lillian she knows. But the thing about long-term relationships is that people grow and change. And if you're resistant to your friend growing and changing, you're just going to push her further away. You're going to get left behind.
Yeah, you are. And I think she's just at such a horrible point where Lillian is growing and thriving, but Annie isn't. And I think that's really hard when you've known someone for so long and your lives are going in such different directions.
It is really hard to be supportive of your friends as they're thriving when you're just barely surviving.
People grow and change. And the thing about long-term friendships and relationships is you have to grow and change together. But this is not the place to bring this up.
At the end of Annie's breakdown outside after she tears up the cookie, Lillian uninvites Annie to her wedding, which at this point I completely understand. She's your best friend, but Annie has ruined every single wedding event. And if I was Lillian, I would not want to risk my wedding day being ruined also. So I understand her wanting to uninvite Annie.
There's definitely a heat of the moment situation here too, but Annie hasn't really been a great person to have along on this ride.
I also understand Annie being hurt, though, like having this huge meltdown, because Annie has been going through a lot lately, and her best friend, who is her usual support system, hasn't been able to be there for her. I think she's just really struggling with dealing with that all on her own.
I think so too. She's in a really tough situation, and she feels very alone.
So as Annie is driving home afterwards, Megan pulls up in her van next to her, and it's filled with puppies.
Megan's not alone now. She's got 9 new dogs. I feel like Megan took all the dogs that people were like, no, I don't need a dog. She's like, I'll take it.
She's like, well, they're not going back to a breeder, so I'll take them.
And then Annie breaks for a porcupine, which I looked it up. There are only porcupines in northern Wisconsin, and she's in southern Wisconsin. But anyway, someone hits her and drives away. And so her car breaks down, and she has to call for help. And Rhodes is the person on the call.
A hit and run obviously sucks, but I'm kind of on Officer Rhodes' side here when he's like, you could have gotten your taillights fixed.
I thought it was really important that he told her that she can hurt people, because it doesn't seem like she does realize that, because she's also hurt Lillian. Ted pulls up and he goes, hey, fuck buddy. And Rhodes is like, really? Then she gets in the car with him. And Ted's like, you want to take a lap nap? I'm so happy that Annie gets out of the car, because she said being murdered is preferable to being with him. Having to walk a long distance is absolutely preferable to having to be in a car with that man.
Especially as he's pressuring you to go down on him.
Yeah, I would absolutely take a nice long walk over that. Also, Jon Hamm was not credited in this movie because he hadn't really done comedy, and he thought it'd be weird for his name to be on a comedy when he was a dramatic actor. Then Annie's back at her mom's house watching Castaway, being very sad.
I've never seen Castaway.
I haven't either. I recognize Tom Hanks and the volleyball. And then Megan and her army of 9 dogs show up.
9 puppies is a lot. I have fostered puppies before, and that is a lot of work. I only ever did 2 at a time because 9 literally seems impossible.
I love how she was like, 9 might have been too many. 6 I could do, but 9 is like, you are very capable, Megan.
Even 6 would be overwhelming for me, so I'm very impressed that Megan has the capacity for that. I love her tough love speech that she gives to Annie.
I do too. And what a weird way to get her to fight back, but it worked. Also, what kind of school did Megan go to that people threw firecrackers at her?
She was very nonchalant about that.
I think it's also super important that she pointed out to Annie. She said, you're your problem, Annie, but you're also your solution. After Megan leaves, Annie starts to get things together. She looks like she's washed her hair. She starts baking. She hugs her mom. She gets her brake lights fixed and sets her mom up with the guy who fixed her brake lights.
And then she makes a carrot cake for Officer Rhodes. She leaves it on his doorstep and sits in her car across the street. How did he not see her? He's not very observant, but he ignores her cake and lets a raccoon get it.
So it's the morning of Lillian's wedding, and Annie's mom wakes her up and is like, aren't you going? And she's like, no, I'm not going. And the mom's like, I'll make you a tuna fish sandwich. And Annie's like, it's 8 a.m. Mom's like, you can have it with syrup. That sounds horrifying. And then Helen shows up and Lillian is missing. Then they get in Annie's car and head out to try to find Lillian. Helen apologizes. It feels like Helen's making excuses, and Annie's like, I just don't want to hear it. Helen tries to make amends, but Annie was like, you're an ugly crier. And Helen's like, no, I'm not.
Immediately brightens her demeanor because she's like, oh no, I can't look ugly.
It's just the makeup.
We get a montage of Annie trying to get Rhodes' attention since he's ignoring her, but they need him to help find Lillian.
I got a kick out of Annie's tactics since there were no cars around when she did them. She litters.
She actually litters this time.
She does donut type things. She does a lowrider going by kind of thing. She drives by topless. She makes Helen put her seat down. It looks like no one's driving the car.
She also drank alcohol, pretended to, I'm assuming, until she finally rear ends Officer Rhodes, and that gets him out of his car. He looks up where Lillian is, and she's at her old apartment. So he's annoyed that they've wasted his time.
And Annie turns to Helen and is like, didn't you say you checked there? He's annoyed. They go to Lillian's apartment, and Annie's like, no, I'll go.
Yeah, I like that Annie insisted on going alone.
I thought this whole scene between Annie and Lillian was really sweet.
I'm glad that they make up.
I don't think they could have stayed apart too long, but I think it would have taken more time to push them back together if this hadn't happened.
I'm glad that they both realize that they made mistakes and are both willing to apologize and try to repair their friendship. I know it's scripted and obviously it had to happen before the wedding so that she could be at the wedding, but just removing the plot from it, I'm happy that they were able to make up before the wedding so that Annie could go to the wedding.
Yeah, I am too.
And Lillian is saying how the wedding is a disaster. Her dress has arrived from Paris. This dress that Lillian puts on is so ruffly.
And the hat.
The hat is wild.
It would have been a very big surprise to get that in the mail if that's not what you thought you were getting. At the wedding, though, Lillian is standing in the water in that dress, and all I could think of was, is that just like sucking up the water?
I was wondering about that too.
I've never understood the standing in water while getting married thing. Maybe there's some meaning to it for people.
I think it looks really cool. It looks like they're floating on water, but I'm pretty sure there's just plexiglass right under the water. I think it's barely any water actually on top of there. So hopefully it wouldn't be soaking up into the dress.
Yeah. Maybe she's got rain boots on underneath.
Because that dress already looks really heavy. Imagine if it was soaking wet. It'd be so much heavier.
That'd be horrible. And then Helen got a surprise, and Wilson Phillips shows up, and Annie kind of gives her a look, and Helen's like, it's the last thing, I promise.
Wilson Phillips' album was in the box that Annie gave Lillian at the bridal shower.
Yeah, and then Wilson Phillips sings, and the dad's like, I'm not paying for this.
This song by Wilson Phillips called Hold On. I knew of this song. It's obviously popular enough that I recognized the tune, but I had never really listened to the lyrics before, and I watched the movie this time with subtitles on, and the lyrics for this song are so perfect for this movie.
Should that be our song for this movie?
Probably. It's so perfect. It's all about how you are standing in your own way of whatever you want. The lyrics are, no one can change your life except for you. Just open your heart and your mind. Is it really... I'm sorry. This song is just like, I want to sing this. It's weird to read lyrics. It says, things can change. Things will go your way if you hold on for one more day. So I think it's very fitting for Annie's story and her character arc through this movie.
I do too.
So after the wedding, Helen and Annie make up.
Helen is just so desperate for a friendship, and I'm really happy that Annie gave her a little olive branch.
Yes, I'm glad that Helen is now going to get to have some female friends for the first time. I hope that Helen and Annie are able to grow together. And Helen apparently called Officer Rhodes.
It's such a sweet gesture. I got a kick out of the fact that Rhodes showed up while he was on duty. Probably problematic, but it was cute for the movie.
Annie and Rhodes make up and they kiss. And then he gets called because he's on duty. And he tells her she has to sit in the back of the car, which doesn't make sense because earlier she sat not in the back of the car.
I wonder if there's a difference getting called in for something.
That's true. I guess that could be different. Yeah, because before they were just pulling over people speeding on the highway. After the credits, there's an extra scene.
Yes, the Megan and Air Marshal John's sandwich sex tape.
I totally forgot about the sandwich. It's a roast beef sandwich, so not my fave, but it is hilarious.
I thought so too. I'm so happy their characters found each other. I know it's all scripted. It seems like they needed each other in their lives.
And I feel like it's very rare to find other people that want to do like savory food play, so I'm glad that they were able to find that with each other. That's it for our Bridesmaids episode. Make sure to subscribe so you can continue celebrating Women's History Month with us as we recap the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, where four best friends find a pair of jeans that magically fit all of them. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving us a rating and review, and head over to our Instagram at Lovebug Club Pod and follow us to see what we have planned for future episodes.